me introduce our brother Charles so that you know who it is we are speaking with. Those of you who are listening to us via the .net, you will be hearing the voice of our brother Charles Gordon. Those of you who are logged on to us live on Zoom, you are actually seeing him in person. Well, let me introduce you to Brother Charles. Brother Charles Gordon, he became an entrepreneur at the age of 19 by setting up his own property letting and management agency. Then moved into the field of property development and established a multi-million-pound property portfolio, as well as building and refurbishing properties across the UK. Charles then turned his hand to the music industry, having success with a number of acts and established a strong foothold in the UK music industry. From there, Charles went on to become an author and published a business self-help guide called The Secrets of Employment. Wow. After experiencing the wrath of the UK legal system for assisting young people from ethnic minorities and also feeling the brunt of systemic racism in the UK, Charles decided to use his wealth to create a voice against racism and a voice for the unity and development of Black people in the UK. A voice that would get us a seat at the table when decisions are being made that impact us. So Charles, like many of us, was disillusioned by politics and could not see any reason to vote, as the politicians did not represent us. Even the few that may look like us in the current political arena had very little influence due to Black people needs generally not being in line with what Labour or Conservatives actually stand for. With this in mind, Charles set up Taking the Initiative Party, a UK national Black-led economic and political party with a view to giving us something to vote for. With the Taking the Initiative Party, we are now in a position to represent ourselves, and when we vote, we will be in a position to not only vote for someone who looks like us, but also walks the mile in our shoes. So through his political party, Charles has also set up some training courses for people who want to be involved in politics and become local councillors in their borough. The aim of the training is to empower people who want to make change within their community and to give them the relevant knowledge and platform to support them in doing so. Charles would like you to be the change you want to see. And it only takes a grain of sand to move an island. To sign up to become a member of the TTIP, you can do that via www.ttip.org. And we're going to hear a lot more about the party and a lot more of Charles, because we're going over to our brother Charles Gordon right now. Rise up, and welcome to the Big G Galaxy of the Week. Brother Charles, what a phenomenal portfolio there. The floor is yours, my brother. Leave us inspired, leave us wanting to become councillors, leave us wanting to be the voice and the change that we want to see. Over to you.
Do you know what? That was such a comprehensive introduction. I don't think I've got much else to say.
You have.
I have to go back to the office and talk to the team because they're giving away the intros. All right. So, I mean, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to kind of take you on a bit of a journey, just the journey that kind of led us to where we are, and the thoughts behind it and the reasons behind it, because I think it's important to establish kind of the reasons why TTIP was formed, and I don't think there's enough of it. And I think largely, I was listening to Brother Jammer, was it, who was speaking a second ago?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, he was moving on levels. I mean, there's so much in what he's saying, and there's so much that I find in society, information that's kind of hidden from us. And I mean, just listening to Brother Jammer and the things he was saying, I mean, it all makes perfect sense. And even the levels of the frequencies, the conversation, and the different frequencies meaning different things, and the fact that the people that are trying to teach us our frequencies don't understand our frequencies. Do you know what? It made perfect sense. And to be honest, I think a large part of what we do and what we don't do in life is kind of based on what we're taught. And for me personally, I started, I mean, when I started in school, I was categorically told that I was unemployable. That was the message
Wow.
across the board. You're unemployable. Don't even try and get a job. Um, but and that's the message that I find a lot of young black kids achieve in schools. Um, the issue with that is, I mean, for me, it led to a place where I was like, right, when I'm unemployable, so I'm not going to try and get a job, so I'm going to become self-employed, and that was my route to take, and which led me to where I am now. So I'm not unhappy about that, but what I think the point to mention here is that a lot of people don't realize how damaging these messages are. And when you're in schools, and we've even got to look at the schools, and I know Brother Jam he's speaking on a different level, and to be honest, there's a lot of times when I look around and I see things and I hear things and I understand things that I know a lot of people aren't ready to understand. And to be fair, one, they're not ready to understand, and two, they're not ready to act on. So even when I'm listening to Brother Joe, I'm like, wow, this guy's actually he's putting it all the way out there, and I have to commend him for that, because I think with a lot of people, they're not ready for, even though they want to talk about it, they're not ready for change, and they don't want to really understand the journey. And I know that's not going to be a lot of the people on this particular station, because I know everyone here is awake, largely, but I think it's one of those where we've all got to understand what the objectives are, and start to work towards achieving them, because ultimately we can all see there's something wrong, we can all sense there's something wrong, we can all feel that there's issues in how things are being dealt with, there's issues in even where we are and where we've been sat, let's say, in the food chain. We all feel that it's not our natural place, but yet the question is, what are we doing about it? And that's the $1 million point that kind of got me to where I am with TTIP, because I sat around and just watched and listened for a long time, and I'm, as someone who'd done very well in society, it wasn't a financial quest for me. It was more a case of, do you know what, we've got to step up and take our seat at the table, because we'll go out and we'll protest about things, we'll have a deep, we'll throw stones at the Houses of Parliament, etc. But the truth is, we should be inside those buildings making those decisions that are impacting us. And the truth is, the system's there, it's set out. We just haven't taken note of what it is, how it is, and how to infiltrate and make it make sense. Because and again, there was another point that I heard mentioned a minute ago as well, just in relation to the mental in slavery that's going on. And I think, even though, and it is quite scary to say, but even though that we're no longer in chains, they've enslaved us in a different way, and it's enslavement in the mind now. And I think we all need to start becoming very conscious of that, because they've got us to a place in life where they're letting us believe that we've kind of reached our limit, that this is us, and a lot of people are content there. But the truth is that we're moving on different levels. The vibrations are much higher. We've just been kind of beaten into submission and forced to accept what isn't necessarily our bit, but we've been led to believe it's our bit. And the key now, I think, is education and re-education, and just releasing our minds to understand that, what I mean. And even if you go back to school and think about the school system, all of these things have all been put in place almost to kind of hinder and limit our growth, because ultimately what they're doing is, and Minister Hakeem from the Nation is a good friend, and one of the things he frequently says to me that Farrakhan said is that you can't send your children to the enemy to educate. And 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 I think that pretty much sums it up, if we're really honest with ourselves when we're thinking about what's going on in the school systems. There's a certain few of us that they let through, and then there's the rest of us that they literally set up a school, what I call a school to prison pipeline, with an objective to get them in there making light switches for £7 a week, which and unfortunately a lot of my friends took that exact route. Do you see what I mean? Luckily for me, I made different decisions which put me in a different place, but it was very easy, and it would have been very easy for me to be in exactly that same position, to the point, and I recall getting arrested when I was 16, and the judge saying to me, well, I think the sentence is far too lenient. And it all made sense to me at that point that this is all by design. And that's the bit I think we need to be very, very mindful of, and understand that, what we've been taught isn't necessarily right. It's been taught to keep us where we are and to stop us progressing to the levels that we can progress to. And I think, sorry, I'm coming off subject because I'm starting to let me take it back to the beginning. so
That is all interesting listening. Carry on, my brother.
All right. So initially for me, when I was in school, I mean, I was told categorically that I wasn't going to achieve anything. I couldn't achieve anything. I was unemployable. So for me, it was a case of, right, well, if I'm unemployable, I'm going to have to go into to do business for myself. I left home when I was 16. Age old story, two balls can't live in a pen. So effectively, I was out on my ear because, you know, dad already had his seat at the head of the table. And what it did for me is it kind of taught me a lot about life. I spent a lot of days just literally kind of from sofa to sofa, and it wasn't out of, right, even though I was homeless technically, it was kind of out of stubbornness and choice, to be fair, because as you know, as people, we're very proud. You know, if someone tells you to leave, you're going to leave. But in fairness, I suppose in hindsight, well, they say I could have come back, but I don't know if they would have let me back, because I did try and get back into the house on a few occasions, and they weren't having it. But but on hindsight, I think it's one of those where all of those things helped make me the person I became, because it wasn't until you sit down and you're trying to work out, right, where is my next meal coming from and what am I going to have to do to get it, that you start to understand the importance of making money, and you start to understand the importance of not having, and the issues around not having money. But I mean, I was in school, I was categorically, my headmaster sat me down, I got suspended from school 13 times between years 2 and 5. And what that was for me was I was very much a out of the box thinker. So if it didn't make sense, I wasn't doing it. I didn't care who you were, who like, if I couldn't logically understand the reasoning behind what you were asking me to do, I wasn't going to do it. And that was a problem, because for the school. So hello. Sorry, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we're hearing you loud and clear. We just had someone else who joined. Please remember to put your device on mute so you don't interrupt the flow. Thank you very much. Yeah, please continue, Charles. Apologies for that.
No problem at all. Yeah, so
wow,
I mean,
how many times did you say you were suspended from school? Oh my gosh, this is a message for, you know, all the young people that are listening. You know, even if you've been suspended from school 13 times, there is still light at the end of the tunnel. Look what you went on to accomplish. Had we not read out your credentials beforehand, I think people would have been folding. But what a story you're telling us. Please continue, my brother.
No, it was a lot. I mean, but what it was, I mean, the most hilarious thing about the suspensions was they were so, I mean, and it got to a place where they didn't want me in school, because I was amongst my peers, amongst the people I went to school with, and my headmaster sat me down. He was a white South African. He made it very clear. He said, look, in every group of people, we have leaders and we have followers. And my job is to eliminate the leaders so everyone else falls into place like sheep. And that was an exact quote from my headmaster at the time. I mean, and they did everything in their power to keep me out of school, because as far as they were concerned, I was a disruption while I was there. So it was more in their interest that I wasn't there, if that made sense. So it was, but then again, for me, it just put me in a place where, I mean, the classic on the suspensions was one time I was actually suspended for being in school when I was suspended. So they'd suspended me, not told me they'd suspended me, or I didn't. I turned up to school and they added an extra 2 weeks to my suspension. So, and that's what it was. And this was a school in Downham in South London. But that's what it was. And these are the things that, and to be fair, I think going back, and I think that when I did actually get arrested at the age of 16, because anytime anything happened in school, whether I was there or not, whether I was in school, out of school, no matter where I was forced to sit in a classroom and write an account of my actions. And even if I wasn't in school, if something happened and I was suspended at the time, when I came back, I had to write an account of where I was and what I knew about the incident, if anything at all. But then in fairness, when I got arrested when I was 16 years old, they sat me in a room and then they started asking me questions. I was like, hold on, this is just like school. And these are the things that I don't think we realize how much the systems are set up and designed to kind of keep us in a certain little box. And that system was designed for me categorically to put me in prison. That was what it was. And it became very, very clear the further I got down the line. And for me, it almost got to a place where, and I think there's a lot of other issues that come off the back of that, because as Black people in the UK, we are very limited on what we have as potentially role models. So even myself, when I was leaving school and I decided I was going into business because I was unemployable, because I'd been categorically told I was unemployable. So I decided I was going into business. I was looking around for role models. And even in my head, I remember there was a particular time I was sitting down with my mum, and I was probably about 15, 16, and I remember being in floods of tears. And she said, what was wrong? And I said, I'm going to be dead. And she said, what do you mean you're going to be dead? I said, I'm going to die, because I could look around and I could see the future for the kids around me, like my white kids and their friends in school and things like that, and the other kids around me, but I couldn't see a future for myself. And that, I think, comes down to affirmation. It comes down to all of those, and having role models, having done what you want to do. So what I found at the time was my role models were like the likes of Richard Branson and Al Fayed and things like that, but there were no successful black people in business. And in my mind, that even though I was attempting to go into business, it definitely had an impact on what I thought I could or couldn't achieve in business. And it's a crucial point for me. And it leads on to why I then wrote the book, The Secrets of Empowerment. Because for me, what I realized is that most of what we achieve in our lives are achieved through visualization. We've got to see it to know we can do it. And for me personally, I have I have what I call the Superman theory. And what it is for me is that you look around, and when I started in business, I started when I was 18 going on 19 years old. I was literally had no money at all. I did a property deal. I got paid £1,500 from the property deal. I used that to buy my sign above my door and my desks and my chairs. And I can't even get into in on record about how I got the rest of the stuff for the office. But but it was, the plan of attack was to basically get into business and try and make it work. But in my mind, it wasn't going to work. And I was battling against every kind of notion that I had in me that was telling me I was going to fail, but I was going to do it anyway, because my thought process was, I've got nothing, and even if I fail, I'm only going to have less of nothing, so it's not going to damage me in any way. But then on the other side to that, it was one of those where I thought, well, I've got no other options. I'm unemployable, so I've got to go into business. And what's the biggest thing you can buy and sell? And at the time, it was a house. So I sat down and said, right, well, I didn't know anything about property as such. I'd probably done a brief stint in estate agency for about 2 months, but decided, right, I was going to be an estate agent. And to be fair, I did the property deal, got the £1,500. I managed to negotiate an office. I didn't know anything. I remember getting a law student, friend of mine who I'd met through another friend, to read through the lease for me to translate it into standard English. But in fairness, even at the time, I didn't care what the lease said, because the worst possible case scenario was that I wasn't going to be able to pay the rent, and I was going to be broke anyway. So I didn't really have anything to lose. And then I went for it, and then ultimately I remember having the first £3,000 in the bank and literally having a tear in my eye, because even in my mind, I didn't think it was achievable. Like, so even though I was doing it and I was winging it as best I could, I remember literally in my mind, I was battling against everything that I'd been programmed with up to that point, because in my mind, subconsciously, I couldn't achieve it. And that was a massive, but I battled through. And to be fair, I think my mum used to always make me listen to these, I can't remember his name, I think it's Dennis Waitley or something, tapes about, I love myself and things like that, those kind of self-affirmations, which, and my mum was a massive point, I think, in pushing me through these things. But I think it's one of those where, if there had been someone who had done it before me, or I'd seen that it could be done, then in my mind, visually, it would have been easier for me to achieve that. And I think that's something that we've got to be very, very conscious of. And I want to say it again, that if there's someone that I've seen that's achieved it, in my mind, it would have made it more achievable for me, because I don't think people understand how important that message is, and how important it is that we create our role models for our kids for tomorrow. Because the things that I see happening out there on the streets now are just, it's beyond anything. And I think, again, the thing that upsets me about most of it is that largely it's by design. Like, these kids, I mean, they, you know what it is. And with the system as it stands at the moment, they're happy to let us have sports. They're happy to let us have music. They're not happy to let us have business. They're not happy to let us have science. They're not happy to let us have the things that give us substance as people. And I think that we've got to, you know, when I think about it, I think we've got to take it. We can't be in a position where we're spending our lives kind of crying about what we haven't been given, because ultimately life doesn't give us anything. We've got to sit down and we've got to take what we want. And I think we've got to understand that we have the ability to take what we want. And I think all of that leads me on to TTIP, because for me, when I look around, I see a lot of these kids that in their minds and in their hearts, they don't believe they have a choice, and they've lost all respect for their own life. And that's, to me, why they then don't respect other people's lives, and respect for themselves as well, because in their minds we're subconsciously programmed that we're lesser citizens, that we can't achieve as much, that we're not as able, we're not as, do you see what I mean? And then even if you look at the programming goes deep, it comes down to even the TV programs that we've got our kids watching at 4 and 5 years old. That the black guy's always the drug dealer, the black guy's always the one who's the gangster, and all of these medias they're happy to put out there, because subconsciously they know that it's changing the dynamic and the thought process of our kids. So these are things that we've got to be very mindful of. And again, it's moving on different levels, and I think it's one of those where sometimes I find it better not to say anything about it, because I find that people are almost offended by it. I mean, it's funny, the film The Matrix came out recently, because there are a lot of people that live within the Matrix and they don't believe that they can change anything in society, but the reality is we can. It's got to start in our minds, though. That's the evolution process. It starts within our minds, and once we understand we can achieve it, we can achieve it. And it comes back to what I mentioned a moment ago, the Superman theory. Because when I started in business, you as you're a kid, you believe you can fly. In your mind, there's nothing you can't do. You know, you're going to be this, you're going to be the best drug dealer there is, you're going to be the best footballer there is, you believe these things, and then as you go through life, it gets beaten out of you bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, and then you get to, by the time you're qualified in any one arena, or you've got enough experience in any one arena, you're already kind of indoctrinated into the money trap. So you've already got your bills, you've got your car, you've got your girlfriend, you've got all the things that are costing you money, and then for you to then put all of that on hold almost, or at risk, to then become self-employed so you can really reach your full potential, is a risk. And it's a risk a lot of people aren't prepared to take, because they stand to lose their potential livelihood in order to then take a risk on something that may not work. Because I mean, entrepreneurship is it's a risky business, and ultimately, even if you get all of the X's in order, there's still a possibility it won't work. And that's the thing. I mean, when people ask me a definition of an entrepreneur, I say it's glorified gambling. We look at the odds and we make bets, and our overall objective is to make as much as we can from those bets. But the other thing is, and the most relevant point is, there is no reward without risk. Like we everything, even if you're investing in stocks and shares, there's an element of risk, and that is part of being an entrepreneur. You've got to kind of suck it up and say, do you know what? I've explored all the options. I've looked at that. I've thought about the eventualities, and I'm going to go for it anyway. And then you've almost got to have a very kind of what's the word, tunnel visioned approach to what you're doing, because there'll be a lot of people around who will try and tell you it won't work and it can't work and you can't do this and you can't do that. And what I've found in those circumstances is, a lot of those times, it's people that they're kind of letting their own failures kind of shine through onto you. So you've got to be very mindful of what you want to achieve, and you've almost got to put your blinkers on and you go at it tooth and nail. And it's and my motto, or my mantra in life is lead, follow, or get out the way, because at the end of the day, we're getting the job done. And the naysayers will always be about, they'll always be there, they'll always be trying to discourage you. Even when I opened my first office in Sydenham, I was told categorically there had been 4 estate agents in that exact same spot and they'd all failed, and I was doomed to fail. And that was by very close family members. So these are things, again, but I mean, ultimately I didn't fail. I mean, I went on to make literally I think we built up a 40-odd million pound property portfolio over the period. And still buying and still building properties, and that is my core business. But I got to a place where, for me, it was a case of, do you know what, we've got to do something not just for us but for our people moving forward. Because if we don't look at changing the next generation, if we don't look at giving them something to work towards, if we don't look at and a lot of these things we can preempt and stop from the beginning. There's so many issues in relation to our society, and there's so many issues in relation to us as a people. And if I give you some figures and some stats, I mean, you'll probably be as astonished as I was, but you're probably aware of the fact that as Black people, according to the last statistics, we represent approximately 3 million out of 65 million in the UK, of which 1.7 million of those are in London, and the rest are scattered throughout. So we've got effectively 1.7 million in London. In London alone, we've got 7.5 million. So we represent probably about 27% of the population in London alone is people of color. And then when you move out of the rest of the 65 million, you've got another million of us scattered. So effectively that's 3 million out of 65 million. But what I want to emphasize now and just highlight is the Jews within our community. And everyone's always astonished when I tell them the figures, because I had to research it just so that I had an understanding of what was going on. But they only represent 270,000 in the UK. So we represent 90% more. And look at what they've achieved as people, and look what we've achieved as people. And these are the things that I really need people to take a long, hard think about, because these are the things that ultimately are what, I mean, as a people, we should have done literally 90% more. I mean, the Jews control everything within our society and within our system, and they secretly control a lot more of it than we even recognize and understand. But what we don't have as Black people in the UK is any form of power. And the reason why we don't have any form of power is because we are so far from united that, I mean, and I think all of that even goes back to the slavery days and the house Negroes and the field Negroes, but they constantly work on keeping us separated. And one of the reasons and one of the key things behind taking the initiative for me was to start to unite us as a people. And everyone's saying to me it's an impossible mission, blah 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 blah. Do you know what? I've united some of the key people already, and I'm confident that we will all get on board when we understand that this is going to benefit us, and more importantly, not just us, it's going to benefit our children. Because if we don't step up and do something, even though we're no longer in chains, physical chains, we are, as Harriet, is it Tubman Harmon? Do you know what? I should know this, but I mean, as Harriet said, I'm not going to say the surname so I don't get it wrong. It's Tubman or Harmon, I remember. But as she said, at the end of the day, I have 3,000 of slaves, and I could have 3,000 more if they knew they were slaves in the first place. And I feel that that's kind of where we are in society, because a lot of us don't realize that we're not anywhere near our potential. We're not anywhere near our peak. And if you look at the Jewish community and the other communities, you can see kind of what the potential is potentially, but we're not anywhere near that. And the reason is that we've got no power in this system. And again, by design. I mean, Conservative Party don't represent us. I mean, and even when I was setting this up, there was conversations around the fact as to whether or not the Conservatives, why aren't we just supporting the Black MPs that we've got? And I had to give an analogy that helped people to understand, and I'll explain it again just for the benefit of what we're saying now. But the issue that I saw was that, imagine you've got Hercules. He could be the best fighter in the world, but if you put him and he has to fight his army before he even gets to the battlefield, how much use is he going to be on the battlefield? And it's a similar scenario, I say, to the MPs that we have got. And the other problem that they have, no disrespect to them, is that they've had to ultimately follow party lines that don't represent us. So they're in a position where, in order to get where they are, they've had to kind of compromise their own self-beliefs largely. And the problem that they have is, in the event that they are very vocal about their self-beliefs, the other issue that they then have is, for argument's sake, Lammy in the Labour Party, I think he has tried to kind of speak out for Black people in certain arenas and things like that. But the problem is they then just backbench them. They stick them to the back, they silence them, they mute them, because they can, because ultimately the system itself that they're within to represent us doesn't represent us. So the issue that they've got is, as much as they might want to represent, they can't, because they're not in a position to, ultimately, because the system won't allow them to. And so then I thought, well, do you know what? The only way we're going to change this is to have our own political party. And ultimately, our objective is to effectively represent, and our core objective is to make sure that as people, as Black people, we are represented, because ultimately these things, I mean, when you sit down and you look at the decision that was made in relation to the free school dinners at school, that tells you everything you need to know. We've got 6% of the politicians in Parliament currently, and that's 6%. There's 650, and out of that 650, effectively 4 of them are from working class backgrounds. So what you've got is and then on the other side to that, if you look at the population as a whole, 70% of the population is working class. So what you've got is you've got a massive disconnect between the people that are supposed to be representing a majority of the people and the people that are representing. So a majority of the MPs, etc., in Parliament, etc., are generally from Eton, Oxford, Cambridge. It's a lot of nepotism going on. And the problem is we've just been kept out and we've been led to believe that we can't get in. So for me, I kind of looked at it and thought, right, well, we need to change that dynamic. Now, how can we physically change how this thing works? And the way to do it was to set up our own political party, which is where we are now. So taking the initiative is a fully registered political party. We're registered with the Electoral Commission. We can put up candidates for members of Parliament position. We can put up candidates for local councillors positions, with an objective to effectively changing the viewpoint. What we want to do is we now need to be in a position where we're representing ourselves. And these things, and again, a lot of people don't understand, and it's deliberate, because in certain places they teach you politics to a large degree and help you to understand that even when you turn on your tap in your house, how much you're paying for that bill is affected by politics. If your child leaves school, how much he has to pay for after school classes is affected by politics. If there's a youth club down the end of the road, is affected by politics. Every aspect of our lives is affected by politics, but for some strange reason, no one's ever told us that. And then they've got us in a position where a lot of us don't vote. And the reason why we don't vote is because the system as it stands doesn't represent us. So even if we vote, I mean, to be fair, I didn't vote. And the reason for me was, why am I voting for a guy who doesn't represent me? So even if I wanted to, and I voted for him, he still doesn't represent me. So the system was flawed, because ultimately, no matter what I did, I still wasn't getting any representation. So why am I wasting my time going out to vote? And then when I spoke to a lot of people, they're in a very similar position, because, and then we've got the few that believe in Labour and that wholeheartedly believe in Labour. But the only thing I'd say about that is, and don't get me wrong, Labour for working class Britain is definitely better than Conservative, because Conservative are very much get off your ass and go and get a job. But whereas Labour are very much on the, but again, I think Conservative have done things over the years that Labour haven't done, and vice versa. Conservative made it possible through the housing schemes for Black people to buy property, which has made it easier, and that put us on the property ladder. These are things that do you see what I mean? But what I think predominantly a lot of people historically have voted Labour, but Labour who did represent us doesn't represent us now. And I think we need to wake up to these points, because I mean, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, that tells you everything you need to know. He's a knight of the realm. He's not he's not someone from a working class background. And the truth of the matter is, in order to understand anyone's journey, you have to have walked a mile in their shoes. Now, the problem that we have with Labour now, and I don't even call them Labour anymore, I call them Conservative Mark II, because the truth of the matter is, what we have now is Conservative and Conservative. And the problem that we have is none of them represent us, and none of them really care about our issues. And even though we've got the issues with the knife crime in Croydon and things like that, and they empathise and they pretend to care, and then they go about and they seek all this funding to then fix these problems. And then the funding even gets allocated, but then no one ever sees the funding. No one ever sees the youth clubs. No one ever sees any of the things that are supposed to have come from this funding. And even when I look at it as an issue, for me, the problem is that they're not trying to fix the problem. There's no money, and it's the same with the medical system. The money isn't in the cure. The money's in the treatment. And the more that the problems are there, the more money they can claim to potentially fix the problems, but not actually fix the problems, because then they won't be able to claim the same money next year. So the truth is, and it does come back to the fact that if you look at other areas like Bromley and certain areas surrounding Croydon, their kids are fine. There's no issues there. Their kids ain't stabbing each other on the road every minute of the day. So the question you have to ask yourself is, these problems are definitely curable, but why is no one curing them? And why does no one care enough to try and fix them? So, and these are things that, again, that for me, it just got to a place where I said, you know what? there's no point crying about it anymore, because crying isn't going to change the dynamic of where we are. What we've got to do is now we've got to step up and do something about it. And that's where we need to be if we're gonna move this situation forward, if we care about our kids. Do you see what I mean? Because things are going from bad to worse. And I'm concerned about my kids being brought up in this country. Even if they're going to stay here. But as someone said to me, and it's solid information, if we're here, let's at least decorate the walls and put down the carpet that we like. Let's make it comfortable for us, so that, one of the things I've been observing while we've been doing this, we've been having meetings in Croydon, etc., and we're based kind of predominantly in Croydon. And there's some parents out there that are literally they're frightened to death every time their child leaves the house as to whether or not they're coming home. And this shouldn't be the norm. It shouldn't be, because in other areas these things aren't happening, but in areas where we represent a majority of the population, these things are happening rife. And I think it's just a case of just us understanding that and stepping up and getting involved. What we're doing with TTIP is we're arranging for basically people to set up satellites. It's a national party. We did a by-election last year in Croydon, and it was purely because I wanted to do the litmus test. I wanted to see how easy it was to get the votes. I wanted to see how easy it was to convert it. I want to see how easy it was to implement change. And we managed to pull in 500 votes in literally 2.5 weeks. And that was out of 2,000 for one of the wards in Croydon. And for me, I think the massive point here is that there is a lot we can do, and I've now done the litmus test and I know we can make the change. But the key is that we need everybody on side in order to make the change. And it doesn't matter what level you're involved in. Even if it's volunteering, dropping leaflets, if it's counselling, speaking to if you want to be a counsellor within your area and represent, we're doing everything we can to assist that process, because we understand the importance of making sure that if we don't step up, then it's time to shut up, because there's no point in crying about the problems if we're not prepared to do something about them. And the truth is, we as a people, we spend a lot of time moaning but not enough time implementing. And the truth is for us, it's the case of we need to get involved and start implementing and working on solutions together as a unit, because once we can achieve that, we're in a very different place. But I think it's just a case of having that understanding, knowing where we are, and knowing what we need to do. And the truth is, yes, it hasn't been done before. There's never been a UK black-led political party. In fairness, I think we've only had it in South Africa and the ANC. So we know that we're breaking molds. We know that we're changing all kinds of dynamics within society, and we ultimately know that there's a lot of people that aren't going to want us to achieve what needs to be achieved here. But that's not something that's going to slow us down. It's not something that's going to stop us. I've never been the guy that is put off by a challenge. So for me, I think as a people, it's time for us to step up. It's time for us to get involved, and it's time for us to acknowledge and understand the fact that if we want our children to grow up in a better place, because this has become our home, if we want our children to grow up in a better place, we've got to step up and we've got to start making changes, and we've all got to work together to achieve them. None of this is rocket science. In any situation, 10 men will always beat 2. But as long as we stay divided, 2 men will always beat 1. And that's the problem that we have as Black people in the UK. And I think we need to acknowledge it. Most other cultures seem to have it together. The white people, the Indians, the Jews, the only people who don't is us. And we now need to start being, and even as I say it, it might seem really obvious, but the real point is how many people have actually sat down and thought about that for a second and thought about what they've done to make it better for their children and their grandchildren, because that's the bit that we've got to be mindful of. Because even though we're not physically in chains anymore and being shipped on boats and carted across the ocean as slaves, they've still got us enslaved in the mind. And prison to me is today's version of modern day slavery. And they've got all of our kids in there, and ultimately they've got them out killing each other. And then when one of them dies, then four of them go to prison making light switches. So and there's so many obvious things. I'm just going to kind of finish up on this note, but there's a typical example. We all know the suburban areas in London. We all know that the more deemed as urban areas, and I'll give you an example of 2. So if you go to, say, Croydon or Brockley, for argument's sake, you're guaranteed within 5 minutes you'll see at least 2 or 3 police cars. You go to other areas like Bromley, Keston, areas like that, which are neighbouring boroughs, but you won't even see a police car. You'll probably see 1 a day. So what they do is there's 1 million laws, and out of those 1 million laws, we all break them. There's no way we can't not break them. The truth of the matter is, in areas like Croydon, you'll get caught straight away. In areas like Keston, no one cares because it's suburbia. And the problem is, and I'll give you another example just to re-emphasize on that point. If you take your car and you drive it in Keston without insurance, you'll probably be able to drive it for about 6 months before anyone even notices you. But you're in Peckham, you're lucky if you get to the end of the road. Croydon, you're lucky if you get to the end of the road, and then you're arrested, and then you're in prison for a year for driving without insurance. And this is all the cycle, and it's all deliberate, and that's why I say it's all by design. We've just got to be mindful of the design and look to do what we can to change it. And once we start implementing the councillor roles and things like that, it puts us in a position where we can then determine the grant funding that is then used to set up the youth club in the area. We can then determine other organisations to police the policing system to make sure that they're not deliberately accusing our children and putting them in prison for no apparent reason. You know, but these are all things that we have to do from around the table. And as much as we can protest and throw stones from outside the building, that's not going to make any long-term change. The only way that we're physically going to change it is in the legislation, is in the law. And the only way to do that is to become councillors. And the other thing that I've done is, I mean, again, from my own funding, we've been putting on courses to teach people what it means to be a local government councillor and what's involved and what the requirements are. Just again, because again, a lot of the times they'll have us believe that we can't be local government councillors. And it's not even something that comes on the table for us. But Labour and Conservative will block us from becoming local government councillors, but the truth is we can. Like, even if you've got a criminal history past, you can become a councillor, all of these things, but they don't tell us that because they don't want us in there, and they want us to believe we're excluded, and more importantly, they want us excluded. So we have to just understand the rules of play and play better. And that's what I've always been about in life. It's whatever the game is, I play to win. And ultimately, this is a game of life, and it's a game of the life for us and our kids. And we need to be playing to win it. And we need to be playing a lot more clever, we need to be a lot cleverer about how we're playing it, because ultimately we're losing, and we're losing our children daily at the moment. And these are things that we've got to become mindful of, and we've got to start doing what we can to change it. So this is an opportunity. This is a call to action. For everyone out there, I need you to go online, sign up onto www.ttip, just behind my head, and just even give us your email details. But anything you can do, have the conversation, and we'll sit down and we'll make it work from our end, because united is how we're going to change this. And the only way we're going to make things better for us and for our kids and our kids' kids is if we start uniting now and stop. I mean, it really irritates me, the fact that as soon as they spread one bit of propaganda about us as a black person, everyone runs, oh no, they're this, they're that, they're the other, but not understanding that, again, it's all by design. Like, these are things that are being done deliberately to keep us back and keep us down, and more importantly, not make us the threat that we are. And I mean, we know, I mean, all the people on this program are awake, so I know that they know about ancient Egypt, and I know they know about the original black man. I know they know about all of those things, so we just need to understand who we are and take our seat at the table. And this is a vehicle for us to do that. I've taken the time to understand the rules and give us the game. All right, and that's it.
Oh, absolutely phenomenal journey you've taken us on. Oh my days. I mean, your life journey that you've just outlined for us there, you know, oops, better talk into the mic so that our listeners who are listening online can hear me. Rise up, Brother Charles. Absolutely phenomenal journey that you have taken us on. We have learned so much. I mean, your life experiences just outlines what a lot of our young people are going through in the schooling system that some of us call the falling system. And, you know, come out totally disillusioned, totally disorientated, totally unaware of the greatness that they actually possess within. But, you know, although that journey and that crushing that happens in the schooling falling system, you know, actually destroys the potential of the vast majority of our young people, it didn't destroy you. And look how much stronger you are as a result of that. Because as you said, you were going through the crushing, maybe all of those exclusions kept you out of the classroom. So while the crushing was going on, you were outside of the falling system. So all the crushing that should have been happening, you know, was happening to everyone else who was in the school and who hadn't been excluded. And whilst you were excluded, maybe you were you know, hanging with the older ones who had learned, you know, a lot of life experiences from outside of the school, and you could learn from them as well. And so, you know, evidence, in my opinion, that you can actually escape the destruction of the falling system by being outside of it to a large extent as well. And as you were saying, you know, Elijah Muhammad, or one of them who was saying, you know, why are we sending our children to the enemy to educate? And there's another saying, you send your school to send your children to Caesar and they'll come out praising Rome. We wonder where we have gone wrong. Only one little thing in all of that you said there, in that phenomenal story, only one thing I would ask, please call our children children and not kids. That's the one little thing that I would ask. Our children, where I am right now, there's loads of kids on the road and these are like goats, they're up and down, they're the kids.
Yeah, very true, very true, very true. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask our audience in Zoom, maybe if they've got any questions that they would like to ask. There's also some comments in the chat that I'd like to bring to your attention. So family, what a story from our brother Charles. What a phenomenal ride that we've been on today. And he's also left us with a call to action as well. That call to action is to join the TTIP party, sign up, register, become part of that movement, the Taking the Initiative movement. We want to soar, you know, like the phoenix above, you know, all of the challenges that we are facing. So let's see what we got, comments we got in the chat. Rise up, Brother Nat Noral, we will be coming to you. One of our presenters on the Big G, he says, rise up, Brother Charles. As we pull together, we are becoming a formidable force. He has a question for you. His question is, what has been the biggest challenge trying to work within the criminal system?
Trying to work within the criminal system. I don't fully understand the question. Ask him. Can we get him on just to explain what he means?
Jump in, Brother Nat. Please qualify your question. Take yourself off mute and jump in. Rise up, Brother Nat.
Rise up. Greetings, family. Happy Kwanzaa, happy Amani Day. Rise up, Brother Charles. First of all, big up and a massive respect. I get straight to it. I mean, when I say criminal system, and rise up, Sister Just Sunrise, she always calls it that. Quite simply, the establishment working within the parliamentary system, working within the political sphere, which I call, AKA, the criminal system, because they're a bunch of criminals trying to do legitimate things.
Yeah, no, love it. That's probably the best word for it, actually, to be fair. I hadn't thought about it for a second. I would have known exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah.
That's where all the crimes happen.
Telling you.
All right. No, so I mean, to be fair, I mean, there are going to be, do you know what it is? My thing is this, I'm an analyst, so I like to look at things, understand it, and work out how we're going to maneuver it and win. So to me, what we've done is, and the way we've set up TTIP, and even when I set it up, to be fair, no one knew that TTIP was a black-led political party, and I deliberately didn't make that known to them until after we were registered with the Electoral Commission. Do you see what I mean? So these are things, and then I had a call from the Electoral Commission which said, you know, we're just checking that, you know, that this Taking the Initiative party is the same to the Taking the Initiative party that's on the website that's been announced as the first. And I said, oh, you're talking about the fact that we're the first black-led political party. Is that what you? So let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I could hear he was really uncomfortable with the conversation. And I said, right. I said, well, what? I said, I just want to explain what that means. I said, at the moment, I feel that black people aren't represented within the current political arena, and I feel that, you know, the political arena is supposed to represent everybody in the UK, and taking that into consideration, what we're emphasizing and the point we're making is that we want to ensure that everybody is represented, including and especially black people, because we feel that we've largely been isolated from the current political system. So and he was like, well, I was just checking because it doesn't say anything like that in your constitution. And I said, well, there's not really a requirement for us to say that, you know, we're a black-led political party in our constitution. Is there? I don't notice anywhere in the constitution for the Conservatives that say that, you know, we're a predominantly white party and we're looking to support the white people. I said, I didn't feel the need for us to have written that down. But in fairness, I said, ultimately, our objective is to ensure that, you know, that we have a fair representation within the political arena, and that's our objective. But yes, in answer to your question, I think they are notably worried about what we're going to achieve, and they should be, because ultimately I think they know the damage that's been done to us over the years. And I think the concern that they have as people generally is the fact that they know what wrongs they've done to us. And the truth of the matter is, if we do start to come together and start to acknowledge and discuss, because one of the things that I'd like to emphasize in the book, I've got a chapter in there called Your Network is Your Net Worth, and that's one of the key factors I think behind what we're doing with the politics. It's linking everyone together, because we have strength in numbers, but more importantly we have knowledge in numbers. Like, we're not all going to know everything about every single subject, but what I've noticed and what I've come across is that we've all got little bits of knowledge about lots and lots of subjects, but if you start to pull that together, then you have lots of knowledge about lots of subjects. But as long as we stay divided, that information doesn't get shared. And what I want to do as part of what we're doing with TTIP is encourage that. I want to make sure that we start to network with each other. We all understand. We're doing a general meeting for our councillors on the 10th of January. But what I'm explaining to everyone is that you're not just councillors, you're family. So if you've got a problem, we've got a problem. And at the end of the day, we work together to solve our problems. I mean, there's a guy within us who is working with us, and he basically had been duped into taking a bridging loan to cover a bankruptcy. And they were due to take his house. But where I had my problems with the legal system, I went and studied law. So I went and educated myself, so that I'm now basically a legal executive, so that I can now deal with legal matters. I did an application to the court, basically got the repossession on his house shut down, and basically basically what's going to happen now is the actual bridging loan that they were trying to repossess his property with will now be unwound. So it'll be a case of that bridging loan was never taken out in the first place, because they've literally tried to exploit him. But had he not met me, he would have lost his house. And these are the things, and these are the things that I think we need to start being more mindful of, because if we really start working together, we become a formidable force. And the people need to really start to, because we've all got knowledge, we've all got different areas of expertise. Do you see what I mean? If I want to know about marketing, I'm going to speak to you guys down at the radio. If you want to know about property, you're going to speak to me. But if those conversations aren't happening, and that's why what you're doing here is so important, because it's about these conversations happening. And even I've forgotten his name, please forgive me, but the vibrations guy.
Brother Jammers, who spoke earlier?
Yes, Brother Jammers, yes, yes. I've got to write that down, actually, because I want to make contact with him after. But even that, the knowledge that he was sharing there, and the way the words were being broken down, if we start to pull that knowledge, can you imagine how dangerous we become? Do you see what I mean? To plug those into the right areas. And these are the things I think that we've really got to start becoming mindful of. And my aim and objective here is just to start to try and educate people. Look, wake up, let's do this, because we can. Like, there's nothing stopping us. So,
wow, nothing stopping us indeed. Thank you, Brother Natnaral, for that question. Wow, wow, wow. We are 5 minutes away before our next presenter. There are some questions in the chat. If you're still with us, I know you're at Thorpe Park, and so you're not going to be with us throughout the day today. Let me just quickly ask one question from the chat. Apologies to those other questions that are not going to be addressed, but maybe we can invite our Brother Charles back another time. But please do sign up to the Taking Initiative Party. Please do become a councillor. You've got nothing to lose. I mean, some of the people who are councillors in my area, I wonder how they got in. So much more some of our people, yes, standing up to be councillors. You can do it. Imani Day says, a brilliant presentation, Charles. We'll be in touch with a young man I know who can contribute to the political discourse. Right, great, great.
Brilliant, thank
she
you.
says, can you say more about Black people getting involved in property? How easy is it? Many of us are in social housing, low income. How can we get onto the property ladder, please? Wow, I think that's another presentation in itself. Really.
You know what? I can summarize.
Right.
Well, actually, no, it is another president. It's a long-winded answer. But what I would say is that the only people that made it easier for us to do that was Conservatives. And we've got to be mindful of that, because even with Labour, as much as they allege to help, what have they really done for us as a people? And that's the point. And these things, it's just making it accessible. Like, one of the things I want to implement is affordable housing for us to buy, because ultimately, properties, a lot of people don't realize, every 6 years properties double in value. So if you buy a property now for 200,000, in 6 years it's 400,000. That's how you acquire wealth. And it's passive income. You're doing everything else you're doing, and you're making that money in your sleep. And those are the things that we need to start becoming more educated on. Because I worked it out very I worked it out very early, and the thing is, a lot of people, we're not told these things. But if you really look at it, for the last 5 decades, every 6.8 years, properties double in value. So if
Wow.
you now for 100, in 6.8 is 200.
It's the way to go. And if you can't afford to buy on your own, collective economics, work together, family properties, why not? I used to always say, you know, because I came from a very large family, and you know, we all left home quite early as well, all our separate properties. And I look across, I'm like, there's 7 house claims, 7 council taxes, 7 electricity bills, 7 gas bills, 7 water rates, 7. Why are we never just all come together as one and pay 1 billion or one big house? Yeah,
But that's
they
the
really,
agent.
yeah, that's the path that they have taken, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the trajectory that we were on, you know, with the extended family, that we got indoctrinated into embracing this nuclear family concept. There's so much more I'd love to continue talking to you about. I mean, I've got all my notes here. I haven't even had the chance to go through them. And, you know, people in the chat are saying great contribution and thanking you. Sister Pauline had a few questions as well, basically asking if you think it's better to go down the road of us establishing our own institutions rather than, you know, the mainstream ones as well. And I think you're about independence, aren't you? Pauline, you need to join the party. Get involved. I know you would make a great councillor for your area. Do get involved. Brother Charles, only because of time, thank you so much. It's been a privilege and honor. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure you have inspired many today.
Hopefully, and thank you very much for having me. It's been amazing as always. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. We've got to do our bit. That's all we can ask.
And
now we need to
are
sit
more
down.
than doing your thing.
When we get to the end of our life, we've got to look back and say, have we done everything that we could do?
Yes,
You know, and
yes.
keep up the good work as well, because I think these forums are so important, so important. So keep it up, and I'm always here to support. All right.
Thank you so much. Keep
You know what?
firing on all cylinders. All the best for 2022.
I'm seeing quite a few bits coming in that I'm seeing messages flash up on my screen. If any, they can hit me up on either via the website for the party. If you join on there, it gives you the option to message, and they'll forward any messages on to me, or they can follow me on Instagram, which is Charles Gordon UK. That's my Instagram name, and they can message me directly on there or however. But get in touch. Get in touch.
Please do drop your email, drop your Instagram in the chat, please, if you get the chance before
okay,
you
I'll do that.
And it really does work. I mean, this is precisely how I managed to hook up Brother Charles. I sent a message via the Taking Initiative Party, and they got back in touch with me within a day or so. So it does work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And everyone, keep doing what you're doing and have an amazing new year. This is the first day of the rest of our lives. Let's make it happen. All right.
Let's make it happen indeed. And as you say, you know, we need to step up or shut up. So let's start stepping up, Carl. We know I got shut up. So we have to step up in our life. Rise up, Brother Charles.
Big up Brother Nat as well. Sorry, I didn't tell him thank you for everything, all the years of support. I've been seeing him around everywhere.
He's an awesome supporter.
No,
we need
100.
more like him, more foot soldiers on the ground. So, family, you can become a councillor, okay? And via the Taking Initiative Party is the way forward. Let's get our own councillors elected, selected, and representing us as independents. Thank you so much, Brother Charles.